Welcome to Introduction to Color Theory, a crash course tutorial by The Tipsy Gypsy.
In this video, we will start off by talking about color wheels, how to find dominant color, and the 60-30-10 ratio, among some other things. So let's start off by discussing color schemes and palettes. And then later on, we will start to get into the 60-30-10 rule, which is a design ratio that can be very constructive in fluid arts. And choosing your dominant color is another key aspect of that. But I believe understanding your color wheel is where it starts. Now, throughout all of these schemes, we use white, black, or sometimes a contrast color to help break up tints and shades. It's especially important in monochromatic. Monochromatic scales are determined and created by using white and black to adjust the tint and shade of a color. You can use gray to adjust the tone. And with painting, to adjust hue and value, we can use complementary colors. Monochromatic can be very simple and it's just using different tints and shades of the same color. But you can also do complex monochromatic, and this is a great example where our values and hues shift close to our neighbors. We can also use a neighboring color as a small accent, or again, white and black. That would look a little something like this. 4 different shades of pink with an orange accent. Here's a piece I painted where I did multiple shades of green and I used gold for a nice accent. Then we have analogous color schemes, aka neighbors. Green, yellow, and blue is a great example of analogous, and I use a black base to help kind of bring some contrast to my color. So standard analogous is going to be a primary, tertiary, and secondary neighbor, okay? You can get more complex than that, and you use quaternary colors, but that's another lesson. You can also use an accent. Here's primary, tertiary, and secondary color with another tertiary accent. Some complex analogous, like mixed, there's different arrangements here. Skipping your tertiary colors and just using a primary, secondary, and another primary. Or you can skip your primaries and secondaries and just do tertiary neighbors. It works just fine, and use a secondary or primary sandwiched in there as an accent. Those are just complex analogous. So analogous is really just any 3 or more consecutive colors on the color wheel, but they need to remain on one half. So between complementaries. You don't want to go from complementary to complementary or opposites, okay? Because that is a completely different color scheme. Accent analogous is 3 colors in a row and then 1 single accent color. So they're purple's across from yellow, red is across from green, and you choose that accent color based on your dominant color. So here we'll go over some examples. Complex accent analogous. 60% blue is my dominant color, green 15%, yellow 15%, and then my accent is 10% purple. Green, yellow, and blue are next to each other on the color wheel, and I chose purple as my accent to the yellow. So for beginners, I would actually recommend you use orange since blue is the dominant color of that drawing, but I used purple to accent my accent because the purple that I used was red heavy, and therefore I knew it would make a nice orange accent, which is a great example of how fluid art can complicate things because of color blending. And now we come to our first color theory trivia question. Go ahead and pause the video on the next screen. What complex color scheme is this? Now in acrylics, there's a unique way to accomplish that scheme, which is incorporated into a bonus question at the end of this tutorial. Triadic, equilateral triangle on the color wheel. That means each color is evenly spaced in a triangle. For this example, I did 60% red, blue, and then yellow. Now, this is a triadic secondary palette, which means green, purple, and orange. There's no primaries. Now pay attention to these drawings. So we have secondary triadics, tertiary triadics, and of course primary triadics. Do you notice anything? So in triadics, they will never mix. True triadics can only ever be primary, secondary, tertiary, quaternary, but we're not going to get into all those, which is when you mix two tertiaries. A triadic scheme will never cross over between primaries, secondaries, tertiaries, etc. It will always be one or the other. Complementary color schemes. In this piece, I do orange and blue. You notice I do 60% and then 40% and then use black and white. So in order to find a complement, you think opposites attract. They complement each other, right? Whenever you're working with complements, remember that primaries and secondaries always complement each other, but tertiary will only ever complement tertiary, quaternary will only ever complement quaternary, etc., etc., etc. So if you're struggling to remember what your complementing color is, you can also think about if your colors are tertiary, secondary, primary to kind of help you along. Now that we've discussed monochromatic and complementary, here's a combination where I use different shades of green and then red. Let's move on to split complementary. This is a range. You have a little bit more range with this one, but it's also harder to understand for a lot of people. It gets confused as triadic a lot. What you're doing is you're literally splitting your dominant color's complement into two colors. And we'll discuss choosing dominant colors later. I want you guys to kind of watch first, and I'll talk you through it again. You see it splitting. There's our split complementary. Okay, so let's review this a little bit. Put it in different words. You find the opposite of your dominant color to find your split point. You use colors from either side of that complementing color, okay? So if my subjects / dominant color is green yellow, then its complement down there is fuchsia. Okay, so now we have to split those colors because split complementary in the name implies we are using two complementary colors instead of one, right? So if I chose green as my dominant, it means fuchsia is getting the split. I hope that makes a little bit of sense. So my split complementary color scheme is yellow-green, and anywhere between blood orange and purple hue, I have a huge space of colors I can use. I just can't use fuchsia, or else I'm just doing a complementary palette and not split complementary. Here's one with an accented blue accent, orange, green, and purple. Here's yellow, red, and violet. Moving on to quadratics. These are intermediate color schemes. They start to get a little more complicated. Quadratics include tetradic and square complementary. Tetradics are always double complementary, okay? It means you're using four colors that they each have a pair, okay? So you can combine any two complementary pairs for a tetradic palette. Sometimes when you look at color wheels, you see this represented by a rectangle. Now, we also have square complementary that is also technically tetradic, but not all tetradics are square complementary. It means that the colors you are using are equally spaced around the color wheel into a square. So, yellow, violet, rose, and teal is square complementary. Now, another example of quadratic, okay, is any four colors that form a rectangle, square, or quadratic shape using different colors anywhere on the color wheel. You can spin it around, move it around, change the shape, and as long as you have 4 different sections spread around that color wheel, it is quadratic. Some examples is split complementary with accent colors, but keep in mind that some things can fit more than one title, and it kind of becomes defined by your dominant color. Here's a great one: 60% indigo, 15% turquoise, 15% mauve, 10% yellow. Well, that's quadratic. It could also qualify as something else. I'm curious what your answers will be. Now let's do complex. Near analogous has an accent color. Complex, incorporating warm versus cool tension in your split complementaries. You have a semi-triad. This example is actually called a neutral triadic harmony for another class, another day. And it can be as complex or simple as you want it to be, but that's as far as I'm going to take you in this quick one. So I do believe that rules are made to be broken, but I also think to break rules successfully, you have to first understand them. Let's dive into 60-30-10. So the best way to choose a dominant color sometimes is to seek out complementary colors. So for this one, it's orange and blue. So using that mindset, try to think about which one of these is a best suited color scheme using 60%, 30%, 10%. Why did I choose these? Well, orange and blue are complements. For a cheery composition, you start off with your cooler color, which would be the orange, and for a more subdued composition, you start off with blue. So complementary colors always make good dominant and accent colors. So there's your 60 and your 10. Your other color is your 30%. Be ready to pause on the next screen for another trivia question. This is a great point to pause the video and ponder this question and then leave your answer below. I'm curious to see if I'm actually teaching you guys anything. Here's another good example for you. Are you able to tell me why this ratio appears pleasing even though the red and orange are not opposites? Keep in mind we have now transitioned into a 4 color palette. In color palettes with more than 3 colors, we still stick to the 60-30-10 rule by splitting our accents. So you keep your 60% dominant and then you do 15, 15, and 10. For 5 colors, you can do 60, 10, 10, 10, and 10, or 60, 15, 15, 5, and 5, and so on. For those just starting with fluid art, I always recommend monochromatic or simple analogous, just because they tend to mud less. In fluid art, teal, deep orange, and yellow gold are a popular combo. This is an accented split complementary that easily can be a tetradic color scheme. Great example of complementary ranges. Using complementary, split complementary, and complex analogous creates really, really bold contrast, and they always tend to give that pop factor, where tertiary, square, and simple analogous are more color gradient and color blending. Applying the right ratio can avoid some busyness and that lack of focus. So that 60-30-10 is really important to understand and play around with before you sit down to paint. Understanding acrylic primaries, well, there's 2 major primary triads, actually more than 2. So you have red, yellow, blue, and then you have magenta, cyan, and yellow. In acrylics, we tend to use magenta, cyan, and yellow because they offer a wider range of chromatic color. But red, blue, and yellow make beautiful, earthy, natural colors, so there is a difference. But understanding this difference is extremely important, especially when we get into complementary and you're choosing which triadic to build your color schemes off of. It can be the difference between a composition and its colors making sense or clashing. Mudding is one of the most common issues, and the wrong hue in your color combo will throw the whole thing off, okay? This wheel we've been using, and all of them have been mixed wheels, okay? And here's the red, yellow, blue wheel again. Those rich earthy tones. I love them so much. So more chromatic color in MCY, more earthy tones on RBY. You're welcome to pause anytime. Definitely pause for this next one coming up. I want you to be able to tell me which one is RBY and which one is MCY. It is separated by top and bottom. So go ahead and pause it now and study those colors for me. Don't cheat. All right, so the top is MCY, magenta, cyan, yellow. The bottom is red, blue, yellow. And if you look around split complementary and analogous, it becomes way more apparent than it does in the monochromatic scales. Some of the complementary and tertiaries match, but you can see it in there too. All right, here's some more advanced material. I want you to pause this and study this picture and tell me if you notice anything unique or different. Okay, pause now. Did you see it? There's multiple primary charts, and it depends on if you're dealing with light, technology, tons of color wheels. We'll review that on another day, but understanding there's different color wheels can help you when it comes to harmonizing color. Bonus question, with acrylic paint, how can we change a color's value and hue and still ensure our colors are correct for both monochromatic and complementary schemes? What color do we add? I want you to put your answer in the comments. And yes, that is a trick question. Well, I hope you learned something and sign up for some courses, you guys. What I just covered would usually be a 6-week course. It's a lot of information. I really encourage you to actually mute the video and watch it and pause it and take notes. And as always, feel free to reach out with any questions you may have. So happy painting, guys.